I think it's been a constant debate through the morning session when Shankar and Bharat were speaking about television versus digital, to the latest panel when Isha was monitoring that in terms of the debate between digital and television. What's largely going to happen in the coming years? Is digital going to overpower television? Will linear television exist in that particular scenario? Will television completely die off? So those are questions that are continuously coming up as time goes by. In this short presentation, we'll try and see how we can answer some of those questions and probably give you an insight about what's happening on the consumer side. Now, the interesting thing over the last 30 years that we have looked at data closely is that the universe tells you largely which direction this market is heading towards. And when I say the universe, there are patterns in the universe that is telling you the fact that this is what the reality check is, actually. So if you keep observing patterns, and there's an amazing quote from one of the American freelance journalists and is a novelist, who talks about the fact that there are patterns and there are more patterns. And within patterns, there are patterns. And patterns are hidden within patterns. And finally, if you keep combing down to the smallest amount of pattern, you can actually start visualizing what exactly is going to happen. This is one of the things that I want you to keep in mind as we go along in this presentation. The second important thing that I want you all to keep in mind is the data exhibits patterns. If you intrinsically look at data, you will see patterns emerging from that. And that pattern will tell you stories about what's going to happen in the future. So patterns, sometimes we call it as chaos, actually, when we look at data, because there's too much of data. For example, in TAM itself, if I go back 20 years, we used to look at around 1 GB of data per day, actually. Today, we look at 800 TBs of data per annum, which means that 1 TB of data per annum has gone up to almost 800 TBs of data. That's a colossal amount of data that we process on an annual basis. So you can get lost within that data itself. But when you comb down to the smallest level, you see, and if you decipher this data, you're seeing the fact that there is a story emerging from it itself. So some of the outputs that I'm going to show you are those small little data which points finally to some direction of what's going to happen in this marketplace. So there is audiences. 3 things that we're going to touch on this particular section is audiences. How are they changing with time? Therefore, how are advertisers changing their strategy? Some of you all heard about it in the 2 morning sessions. And the third one is, how is measurement going to change with time? Okay, let's understand how audiences are changing. And I think Anil rightly put it in the last session. Things have changed in the last 50 years. What was radio dominating this marketplace gave way to terrestrial transmission. Terrestrial transmission gave way to cable and satellite. And now broadband is intruding into the cable and satellite. So has this made the audiences change their behavior patterns? We went back to our database in 2010 when we ran a television panel. And we picked up a sample of those television homes, which was heavily watching television during that period of time, to go back in 2022 to install a couple of equipments over there to understand what is exactly happening within these homes. So therefore, there was same 2010 panel, the same members of the same home in 2022. And what we were doing was to catch 2 things, actually. One, what is the kind of television viewing habits they have now, today, compared to 10 years back or 12 years back? And what kind of content are they consuming or are they engaging with on a continuous basis in what kind of devices? The entire thing can be summed up in this quad, or the 4-cell grid, actually. Okay? The first one is the time spent part of it. You see high time spent homes, low time spent homes on television. And on the other side is the engagement factor which is basically governed by the stickiness to watch a particular content. Are you surfing too much? Or are you surfing less? If you're surfing less, you're engaged more with the content. If you're surfing more, you're just dismissing the content and moving on, surfing along quite a bit. Okay? And this is primarily on television. What we noticed was the fact that in 2010, an average consumer was spending around close to 272 minutes watching television. And on an average viewing time, they had 33 switchings, actually, which means that the switching was across multiple content across the television viewing habits. Today, that's not dropped down dramatically, which means there is hope on television. Okay? The viewers who watch 272 minutes are still spending 245 minutes, which means that on a core basis, television still have audiences. They have not lost them out. Those audiences are engaging with television. The only thing is the fact that the number of switchings or surfing has come down, which means they're more loyal to content, or some of the content that they're watching are more engaging in nature. They don't want to surf too much. That is among people who are high time spent on television and people who are high switchers of television content. If you look at them and understand what's happening, okay, there are two things happening over there, actually. One is that the average number of members watching television has come down or shrunk, which means in 2012, the same television content on prime time used to be engaging around 3.5 members or 4 members of a family. Today, that's come down to just 2 members or 2.5 members, actually. Straight away cut down by 35%, actually. Which means the fact that there may be members present in the room, but not glued to television per se. Concurrently, there are other devices also running in the home from where we are getting data from, which means the fact that content is getting spread across multiple devices, not with one device, which was there 12 years back, actually. Now look at just the opposite side, the diagonally opposite side, who were anyway low time spent on television, and homes which were less switchers or just wanted to watch certain programs on television. What's happening to them? Over there, the 17 minutes that they used to spend on television has reduced by 50%, actually, straight away. And whatever they wanted to watch, they still watch a bit of it, and that's it. Which means the fact that they are no longer interested on television per se. What's happening? They're coming to television now only for some specific shows, probably a cricket match, India-Pakistan cricket match, or probably a big news item that is happening in the news to catch that up. So in a way, these are the guys who have already left television or minimalist on television 10 years back, and they are now more or less left television per se, which is where is giving you the cord cutting largely coming from. The other two segments, the third segment, which is the highly engaging time spent on television but low number of switches, which means the fact that they are addicted to certain kind of programs, could be a GEC, could be a movie. Around 209 minutes on television in 2010 or 12 has come down to 116 minutes. Almost half the time spent has gone away from television. Where have they gone? This is where things have changed. Mobile devices intruded into that home. That has taken away time from television. And I watch TV as elders have switched it on TV. But the thing is, I'm just sampling the content. That's it. My attention is on the device. Somebody else has switched on the TV. I'm no longer part of television, actually. Okay. But I'm consuming my content on the device concurrently as much as the television is going on at that given moment of time. And the fourth one is basically the low time spent or low engaging time spent guys, but high switching, actually, which is more or less remaining the same. But they again come for solo viewing, late hours of viewing for specific programs per se. So the most important thing that has happened is television has moved out of these three buckets completely, of audiences completely. This is the segment that television is largely catering to. So if you now go and drill down into that data, so when we talk about television viewing coming down, what is happening to content on television, etc., you're largely noticing the fact that you're losing out audiences on three buckets. So it could be interesting to notice, therefore, who are these profiles of audiences who are moving out of television, and who is the core audience of television who is sticking on to television content even more in this today's digital world. These are some of the statements that came about. Those core television audience people are saying, with so many people at home, each with their content preferences, I end up watching a lot of content in bits and pieces, actually. So I'm not, there were a lot of influences that are happening in, so therefore I'm not able to understand what to watch, but what I want to watch, I will watch it. Here, I don't get too much time to watch television, so I'm very selective about what I watch. Okay. Could be a cricket, could be a news item. I like watching TV and be involved with it, which is what I watch, which is largely the soaps or the specific movie premieres, etc. coming in. And the last one, I come late at night and surf across a lot of channels. I just stick to what comes at that moment of time, really. Some of the statements that came out verbatim from the discussions that we had. Now, if you look at the preferences of content, you're seeing this largely in multiple genres. If I keep up the three big genres, GEC, movies, and news, actually, you'll see that the Hindi GEC is declining. But on the other hand, the four markets in the regional south are going strong, which means the fact that somewhere the digital world has affected in the Hindi belt more than largely the four regional south markets, actually. If you look at the movie segment, largely it has remained the same, or even Hindi has also increased because of the kind of movies. And the interesting thing about Hindi movie genre in television is that they now have realized the audience taste and decide to dub South Indian movies into Hindi to cater to that particular regional taste too. News, on the other hand, again, you see a decline. While the South news is increasing, you see a marginal decline in the Hindi news preference in the Hindi belt. Now, the interesting thing is between the thin line that divides between the digital world and the television world, actually, or the linear world. If you look at the top television channels across markets, okay, you will see largely the Hindi channels dominating the Hindi belt, Marathi dominating the Marathi belt, so the language is playing a significant role, Bangla dominating Bengal, and the South dominated by the South regional channels. Now look at the top OTT channels that are to which the viewing is actually happening across the same set of markets. YouTube, 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 YouTube. Hotstar, 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 Hotstar. There is no channel alignment like the way it's happening, which is skewed to the markets in the television linear side, actually. Which means the fact that these have become brands where I get everything. It's like a buffet lunch being served. Depending on your taste and your choice of content, you can choose what you want to have. And that has pulled in audiences in these markets too. So therefore, if I'm trying to partition an OTT channel which is based on language, actually, like the example of an AHA, then the chances of success is very little, purely because the big guys are already providing that particular kind of content, language and content that is aligned to that local regional markets itself. So the learning from television doesn't really mean the fact that you will succeed in regional in the OTT side in the same way as you have done it in the television segment. So in large, when I look at those three buckets that I was talking to you about, the audiences that have moved out of the television into digital, and try to classify them in terms of profile to know, therefore, what are they watching and what are they don't watch on television. The biggest segment for television in the future is going to be this clinging generation segment, which is largely made up of housewives, higher age group segment, which is 40 plus age group segment, which we call it as the millennials, actually. No, sorry, not the millennials, is it? Yeah, the millennials, which is 40 plus age group segment. Loyalty to strong program, and they constitute 69% of total viewing on television. So this is the segment that is more getting aligned to television. The remaining three buckets are largely coming into these two segments, which is the trendy generation and the impatient generation. The trendy generation is largely made up of the Gen Z, which is basically the 10 to 24 kind of age group segment, with very easy to break loyalty. They're easy to adapt to new formats, and therefore short videos are the in thing for them more than anything else. And the impatient generation, which wants to know stuff at the press of a button, and then once they get satisfied with that, they just move off. Very little time spent on television itself. Go a little bit more deeper into the three segments. The clinging generation segment, which constitutes 69%. It has grown from a 2010 to 2012 to 2022. It's grown from 64% to 69%. What we're seeing is they're slow in evolution. They follow a set tradition, largely made up of elders, exposed to devices, but they're not so easy to handle devices. Therefore, very strong with television even today. Influenced by social media recommendations and friends. Excitement is in the form of strong story, aspirational stories, and characters linked to it. So if you have a good content aligned in that direction, strongly sticks with them. Not necessary to have big stars. They're not phantoming big celebrities to come and anchor shows, etc. But stories are more important for them. And very strong in building. Once they like a program, they are there forever, actually. It's like a brand having strong, loyal users for itself. Primarily, consumers are housewives or elderly female. Primarily consume soaps, content, movies, and regional news are also part of the menu. If you look at the trendy one, which is shrinking to almost 9% from a 14% over the last 10 years. They're fast in evolution, opinionated. It's my voice that is important to be seen, therefore my opinions are important. Bored with TV completely, because the offering is more or less the same every day in nature. High on social media, short video formats significantly, and very easy to break loyalty. Available across day parts, while the other two are available more on afternoon and evening time, prime time. This is across the day, this segment is available. But most of the content that they earlier used to watch, which is basically strong reality shows on television, has given way to consuming those reality content on Facebook and WhatsApp, etc., through the viral videos that come out of for the performances that happens on reality genre. The last one is the impatient genre, which is faster than what you can catch them easily, because they're surfing continuously either on television or on social media. It's a big events. That's the only one that pulls them in, and they spend a lot of time during these big events like T20 World Cup or election time. And at the same time, they're not so worried about excitement of the story, but what they're requiring is things which are giving them high adrenaline action. So, and they keep surfing between devices, television, and mobile devices, primarily youth and chief age earner. So that's the three segments that is largely coming into the television play and digital play out. On the digital impact side, you're seeing tremendous growth in terms of the hours of consumption that's happening. In the last 3 years, we're seeing around close to 4.55% jump in the total time an average consumer is consuming content on digital platforms. Already we have around 65 streaming apps with 60 million homes paying for it, actually. But the average consumption still remains around 2.5 subscriptions per customer or per home. The rest of them largely are, again, the same profiles that I mentioned about. And OTT is also catching up. At this moment, it's a small one. 80% is still YouTube and Facebook. If I remove that out, the rest of the OTT category is around 10% of the overall share. So the key takeaways on audiences are, the most important thing, what we always believed earlier, television being a family entertaining medium, has now become a personal medium itself. It's slowly moving into the personal space rather than a family space that it was always associated with. And which means the fact that connected television is not far away, actually, which further eulogizes the fact that television needs to be personalized. Increasing connected devices leading to far further fragmentation of audiences watching. And at the same time, what we are seeing is television becoming important when there are tentpole properties. So when you have a television scenario with 600 channels, and there are few tentpole properties that attract the audiences, the prices of those tentpole properties will continue to shoot up because that's where audiences are getting accumulated to. So that's something that television needs to watch out for. Apart from that, the rest of the things are largely digital skewed in nature. If you look at the only other good thing for television is a subscriber today even subscribes to just around 2.5 channels on OTT side, actually. While there are around 25 plus channels that he still subscribes to on the television side. So that's a plus point for television to continue to create content that will strongly engage with audiences. At least the penetration does exist for most of the channels. Conclusion largely is that television still has a max advantage between a fight between television and digital. It's not that they have lost out to digital, but it's a matter of time. If you don't roll up your sleeves and get things going along in terms of acquisition of good tentpole properties, acquisition of good storyline for your strong soap properties, which is basically focusing on the core television audiences, okay, then the chances of the fact that you will lose out slowly to digital more and more in nature. How has that shifted strategies for me from advertisers? Okay. Now, when we, in the beginning of the year, when we were predicting your revenues for digital platform in the year 2002 and 2022 and 23, we were expecting around digital to do around close to 31,000 crores at an overall level. But the interesting thing is I was just reading the reports from Facebook and Google. And Google has touched around 25,000 crores already. And Facebook is grossing around 16,000 crores. And if I put in the e-com advertising, which is Flipkart and Amazon also, that's doing around 6,300 crores actually. So you're talking about a 47,000 crore only by these guys, which constitute around 85% of the total digital ad spends. You're talking about around 52,000 crores, therefore exceeding what is probably television is garnering, which is around 38 to 40,000 crores. So the question is the fact that probably by the end of the year, we are probably seeing digital crossing television from an advertising revenue perspective. 2023, if this is the growth momentum it's maintaining, it looks like digital may touch even 65,000 crores. So linear television definitely will be in a desperate mode to take help to salvage revenues from moving onto digital side. If you look at the sectors that's moving, the top 4 sectors on digital: services, banking and finance, which is always there. But consumer durables have been a major shift into digital that has happened, and including, of course, education, nature. If you look at the forms of distribution of revenue across different formats, okay, you see online video almost coming closer and closer to social media revenues, actually. Okay. So video formats are a big thing, and it's definitely making an impact in the digital side. And if I look at the number of advertisers that have got onto the bandwagon of each of the digital platforms, okay, you have already around OTT at around 10,000 advertisers actually. If I combine all these guys, which is almost around close to 150,000 odd advertisers, that's almost coming closer to print, leaving television way behind in nature. And if I look at how things have changed between digital and television, in year 2019, there were only around 1,850 advertisers of television advertising on digital. But now, almost double of that is actually duplicating between television and digital per se. And the same thing is happening with print. Okay. Print has doubled from 4,900 advertisers on print and television and digital has moved down to almost 8,000 advertisers on print and digital together. So all this indicates the fact that some of the strategies that print is already starting off, like for example, Hindu has started combining the team between digital and print together to make it a composite team to market to advertisers. Those are the right trends, are the right steps as we go along in the coming years. Between All India and South, we are seeing almost positive growth in the South segment by almost 190 categories are shown year-on-year growth rates coming onto digital side. So what we did was that out of these 100 and 200 odd advertisers, we picked up categories from where advertisers were going onto digital. We picked up a couple of them as examples. One of the categories we picked up was actually Dream11 on a national level, and one player we picked up from the regional South level. To see how is it changing, the game between television, print, with how is digital is changing. If you look at this chart, in 2019, Dream11 had a composition of 56% on digital and 44% on television. In 2022, television has just come below 10% share, and the 90% of them has completely gone towards digital. If I go to the other side, in terms of the amount of insertions that the brand is actually happening on digital, it's almost climbed 9 times actually. And if I look at the drop in terms of the insertions on television, it's almost around 30% drop in the number of insertions on television. And if I look at publishers that are being used on digital side, 800 has jumped around 1,247 publishers on digital. While television channels, which was at 84 channels, have come down to around 38 channels in terms of usage. So obviously, Dream11 is still in an expansion mode, trying to build more customers to come onto its platform. But at that stage itself, they've seen digital not just from a frequency perspective, but they're now looking digital even from a reach perspective, which is the real threat for television. So what's happening, therefore? Television is therefore getting consigned to specific properties that gives them reach. Bulk of the properties are getting knocked off. And because anyway on digital, each of the channels are adding on reach, a bulk of the channels put together is giving a substantial reach numbers actually. So it's a TV versus digital fight on the reach platform, not on the frequency platform. And the other interesting thing is basically the way things are changing again on the digital side from a video perspective. Okay? In 2019, they had almost around 90% completely on video. Okay? Here, display has started coming to play also at the same time. So video shrunk in an expanded budget, video shrunk and display banners are coming in. So it's more of a reminder that digital is also getting used to tell them the fact that go in instantly because as the game is going to start and get on plug-in to get your teams put into the platform. Celebrity usage is the other interesting thing actually, okay? on digital versus television. The celebrity usage, which was at 62%, has jumped up to almost 80% in 2022. And when I come down to the next one, which is basically to showcase whether these celebrities are national or regional or even hyper-local, while they do a bit of television advertising with the Dhonis of the world and the Virats of the world, etc., it's getting more and more regional celebrities and hyper-local influencers who are getting used as in the advertising communication to propagate the brand continuously. So that's how things are changing on big advertisers who initially were very strong on the television platform. And what is the yield that they got? In spite of this change, what we see is a 53% jump in their overall revenues for Dream11, and their advertising expenditure has further increased by 35%. We picked up a brand from the 4 regional markets, Achi. And we're seeing similar trends. Although, I may say the fact that in South, because as we saw in the earlier slide, the share of television being still strong in nature in the 4 South regional market, in the GEC side, in the movie side, and the news side. The drop in television is not so dramatic as the way it's being played out in the national level. We are seeing television still somewhere close to 90% actually in 2022. Just a small inch of around 10% intrusion that the digital has actually taken up. As you see, therefore, digital was not existing in 2019. There's a bump up in terms of the amount of insertions and impressions that they're getting from digital. While digital has grown substantially, the drop in television channels is minor. From 106, they've dropped down to 100 or so, actually. But the print drop is dramatic, actually. They're almost half of. So in this case, in South, it's not television that dramatically affected, as what Bharat's concern was in the first panel. It's print that is getting affected even more drastically than television. But the route that they're taking is very, very similar, actually. When you look at celebrities, they are also on celebrities, but they're using television with celebrities. On digital, the share of celebrity advertising communication is pretty small in nature as of now. But the same thing, the change in strategy has not affected the revenues. The revenues are expected to jump by almost 90% between the 2 years. And their advertising expenditure is continuing to grow by almost a quarter. So these are examples. There are many such examples, but I just took 2 of them out to explain what exactly is happening in the marketplace. So therefore, if audiences are changing, advertisers are changing, what's happening to the measurement side, actually? There are 3 things that are happening. One is in the creator side, actually. The number of creators continue to increase because of the digital platform. The content is dramatically growing 4.5 times more than what it was in the previous year. Content options are becoming increasingly more in the hyperlocal level. Therefore, keeping a track of what is happening, getting consumed at a hyperlocal level is of biggest concern for most of the measurement companies that will happen in the future. From an audience perspective, CPMs are going to shoot up, primarily because of the fact that audiences are getting pocketed into groups. There is no such thing called as a national audience anymore, actually. There's regional and hyperlocal audiences in different pockets of the country emerging and synchronizing with each other in nature. So to talk to them, you will require multiple channels to address to them. And in that increasing number of channels, your costs per CPM will go up dramatically. Audiences connected on different devices, and therefore their habits during the course of the day itself will be continuously be changing. So for measurement companies, there will be a need to measure not just a linear television alone or one device per se, like a mobile. Even a connected TV will be important. A retail media outlet will be important. A outdoor site, a transition site will be important in nature. So that data comes from all places to synchronize and connect with each other. And from a distribution platform perspective, therefore, regional platforms and hyperlocal platforms will become very, very essential in nature. Not differentiating from a language perspective, but purely usage from a community perspective or a hyperlocal group perspective. It's not just video, but audio will be as much synchronizing with each other to create that, to influence that particular audiences. So therefore, when we look at measurement, today, when we talk about measurement, it's at the stage where we are having individual measurement for individual platforms in nature. Okay. As we move along, the audio and the video will get combined completely into one single synchronized measurement. It's already being, like for example, in US, Nielsen is doing what is called as a gauge reports, actually. The gauge report is a combination of linear television content and OTT content being measured inside the television content per se. In India, as TAM, we are starting off with radio next year. We'll be measuring radio stations and also streaming apps within the same homes which are listening to radio stations, which means that you can get a combination of what is exactly happening in terms of switching between the radio station and the radio app. So a Ghana and a Savan duplication with a Radio City or a Big FM will be the next first thing that we'll be doing, experimenting with. And as you go along, what will happen is the census data coming from each platform will get fused with the data, the dual reporting platform data. So a video and audio combined together with the census data from the platform or the app will give you a complete picture as well as granular data about how audiences are behaving in specific pockets of the marketplace, consuming specific content, even at a hyperlocal level in nature. So in other words, there was a question about metrics, actually. What kind of metrics will actually happen in the near future? Reach and frequency will no longer be the only ultimate goal of a campaign action. We'll also start looking at, advertising will start looking at how much of the audiences were paying attention to my communication or not. And therefore build my reach frequency on the basis of active viewing versus passive viewing. So attention ratings will start coming into play already. Quite a few advertisers in this marketplace and in US use attention ratings to gauge and understand how effective my communication has been within the population that is actually seeing my communication on different platforms. Second is single screen metrics will give way to what we call it as an actionable ratings by looking at co-viewing between main screen television and as well as mobile screens or second devices screens actually. So click on website or e-com transactions will become a parlay along with viewing habits. So where today, when I look at the connected TV data in a market like US, okay, the one that is giving run to YouTube is actually Amazon Prime Video. Prime Video is allowing audiences to shuffle between the content that they watch, the ad they watch, and to the e-com platforms straight away in nature, just like the way they're slowly building up in India, like Flipkart and Amazon are doing. But that's slowly eating into the linear television as well as into digital platform like YouTube. Standalone platforms on digital, which is only giving advertising, just like the way television is actually delivering, is slowly going to scale down in terms of value. And lastly, in-home viewing is one part of it actually, but with digital screens coming on the on highways, okay, and streets, what we are definitely seeing is an ability to gather data from these signposts and retail television together, combined with the in-home television viewing and mobile devices viewing to give you a complete picture, which means the fact that what we'll move on to something called as a mobility ratings or linked with in-store purchases. That means the fact that you're moving into a situation where you're getting consumer purchase transactions in-store along with e-com purchase information combined with the data on viewing habits per se. So that's largely what I want to leave you with. So therefore, if I look at the next 50 years of media as such, where we were in traditional TV, print, radio, cinema, etc., as single silo platforms, we will be moving into an integrated media platform in the near future. And in that, advertising is going to play a significant role, actually. So it's not going to be subscriber-driven in nature. It's going to be AVOD in nature. And advertising will continue to grow significantly because of the changes that consumer is driving at and because of the technology that is making those changes getting driven up. PVOD will also be strong purely because of big ticket items like World Cup or IPL or Big Boss or Indian Idols, etc. So TVOD will continue to be there, but AVOD will drive that. And obviously, MCOM or the mobile commerce taking more and more in a bigger shape. But frankly, as I think the earlier panel also indicated, this is the direction the market is heading towards. Technology and consumers are changing to make that happen, actually. So there is no way anything can prevent from this not happening. Measurement, obviously, and metrics, obviously, will come in along with that changes that are happening. And I predict that in the next 3 years, we'll have most of the metrics that we talked about shaping up in a significant way.